I didn't want the very first time I cooked in the number 6 smoker to have a sausage failure because of something I did. Well, turns out that the joke's on me. Wow. I gotta say, this was a first. All right, everybody, welcome to the channel. I'm glad you could be here. Let me tell you something. It has been a busy 2 weeks over here. I don't even know where to begin. Some of you have been asking for an update on the Pro Series number 6 smoker from Smokin' It Smoker. Is it ready for sale? Are we done with the testing? Well, in this video, you're gonna see we are ramping back up the testing for what I'm still considering this prototype. It's not quite ready, and if you've been keeping up with some of the posts and some of the shorts that we've uploaded here recently, you know this video is going to end a little while. Before we get into that, though, let's do a little sausage story time. In the comment section below, let me know, what was the first sausage you ever tried to make on your own, and what were the results? I'd love to hear about it. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my first sausage experience. As a kid growing up in a small town in Southwest Louisiana, we didn't have a lot of exotic sausages. Now, I'm sure they were certainly available at the grocery store, but in our household, we didn't need them. Yeah, we had the hot dog, we had the boudin, lots of boudin. We had andouille and green onion sausage. Maybe we'd go down to Tony's Pizza in Lake Charles, Louisiana, and get that Italian sausage pie. But outside of that, the world of sausages was pretty foreign to me. And it wasn't until I married my wife, and I was about 23, maybe 24 years old, that I ever had my first bratwurst. It was a Johnsonville cheddar brat. Now, before you judge me, you got to realize that this was the only sausage available at this party. And since I had never had said sausage, I took it, stuck it in a bun with a little mustard and some sauerkraut, proceeded to give it a bite, and I got to admit, it was the most delicious thing I had ever tasted. Now, I'm probably 23, 24 years old, eating a sausage for the first time that was unlike anything I had ever eaten. My mind was literally blown. And I can honestly say that eating that bratwurst changed my life forever. Primarily because over the next 14 days, I bought every version of brats that Johnsonville made. Jalapeno, original, beer, you name it, we had it. We ate it every single day, and it was awesome up until about day 13. After day 13, I got completely sick of it. I didn't want to eat another bratwurst of any variety ever again. And I swore off bratwurst. Now, we're going to move forward about 10 years. And I am now in a place where I want to learn how to make sausages. Now, unfortunately, during that time in history, there really wasn't a huge community of sausage makers that were all willing to share their secrets. Everybody kept their secrets closely guarded. And so if you wanted to make sausages, you would either have to go to the library and get a book. Sounds like a wild idea, right? Maybe even study as an apprentice under an experienced sausage maker, or do it the good old-fashioned way, trial and error. Well, I didn't know anybody who made sausages, and I am a hands-on kind of learner, and so I decided to start my sausage making journey the good old-fashioned way, trial and error. After all, how hard can it be? It's seasoned ground meat stuffed into a casing and cooked. That sounds kind of easy. So after swearing off bratwurst for almost a decade, I thought that the very first sausage I would ever make on my own was the brats. And I honestly thought that this would reignite the love that I had for this amazing German sausage. The only problem was that I didn't have any equipment. But I had this incredible desire to make sausage, and so I think I bought a number 22 grinder when I first started. And in my mind, I thought, you know what, I can grind the meat with it. It's a pretty decent sized grinder, but I can also use it to stuff it into the casings. It's kind of an all-in-one. I'll mix everything by hand, and let's go ahead and get it going. Now, I do got to say that it is an interesting experience trying to make sausage and not having a clue as to what you're doing. Now, this is more than likely going to hit home to most sausage makers on the planet at one point or another, because that was me making bratwurst. I didn't know what I was doing. And you would think that the process of making sausage is pretty intuitive, right? Take your meat, grind it, add some seasonings, mix it, put it into a casing, and cook it. Doesn't seem complicated. The meat was coming out of that grinder, and I gotta say, it looked beautiful. I was smashing down that double grind, smashing it with that plunger. It was coming out the other end, and you'd have thought this was the very first time I'd ever ground meat. Looking back, it might have been. But I was gaining so much confidence in this sausage making process. I'm like, man, I got this. I got this. Look at this. Step number 1, done, right? We didn't pay attention to temperature. We didn't pay attention to fat ratio, nothing like that. But it's now a step number 2, seasonings, all right? I didn't have a recipe. I just remember there was nutmeg, and I remember it was salty, and I remember there was cheddar. I wasn't going to put cheddar in my brats, but so I grabbed the nutmeg and I grabbed my spoons. So I'm going to start adding spoonfuls of seasonings. Right, so I'm going to add a half a teaspoon of nutmeg and 3 or 4 teaspoons of salt and so on and so forth. Pepper, I figured there was pepper in it. Add a little water At that time, I think I just added some water because the batter seemed super thick. But I didn't know how much water to add or whether it was even appropriate to add water. And then it came time to mix the meat. Now, let me tell you something about myself. I am the kind of person that likes to work in definitives. The known is a very comfortable place for me. I want to know the exact. The unknown tends to be a little bit trickier. But if sausage making has taught me anything, it's taught me that you can't live your life in definitives because there's a lot of uncertainties. Sometimes life throws you a curveball and you got to move in a different direction. You know what I'm saying? Well, that's what sausage making is all about. Sometimes sausage making will throw you a curveball. You got to do something a little different. And so that's a concept that I had to get used to. But at this point, I hadn't gotten used to it yet. And I am about to mix this bratwurst. It smells great, heavy on the nutmeg. It's kind of gooey a little bit because I added some water. Double grind. I started on a 10 millimeter. I ended on a 3 millimeter. So it's very pasty, if you can imagine what that might look like. And I thought, how long do I mix this? Because I don't want to screw this up. It's my very first sausage. And I figured, you know what, I can ask somebody. So I thought, you know what, let me call a meat market right quick, a butcher, and ask them, right? I'm from South Louisiana. There's a lot of meat markets all over the place. At Jennings, Iota, Lake Charles, Sulphur, all these places have beautiful meat markets. Let me call the meat market that's in the small town that my dad grew up in. They know my family. They're not going to think I'm crazy. Hey, I'm just trying to make sausage for the first time. Surely they'll understand. And so I get on the phone. I look up this small meat market up in the little bitty old town, Cajun town in Louisiana, and I talk to the head butcher and ask them, how long do you mix your meat when you make sausage? And I had a little pen and paper ready right there. Batter of meat ready to go, and I'm waiting for the answer. And he said, well, sometimes we mix it for 5 minutes, and sometimes we mix it for 15 minutes. Good luck. And then he hung up on me. Sometimes we mix it for 5 and 15 minutes. And so I figured, you know what, let me just cut that right down the middle, mix it for that amount of time. And I'm using my hands and I just start mixing, and I'm mixing for 7.5 minutes. And this thing is so sticky and so gooey and so crazy. And in my mind, I'm thinking, hey, you know what, this is exactly the way it should be. I'm making sausage right now, and this is a dirty process. And I get my wife in there, look, we're making bratwurst. Remember the last time we had bratwurst? She said, I don't want to even taste it. I'm like, don't worry, this is going to be better. I take that meat, stick it back into the grinder, but change the fittings, and now it's a stuffer, and I'm stuffing that plunger with this meat, and it's the nastiest, most stressful, awkward, and disgusting process. I mean, it's literally all over the place. I think I ended up with more sausage all over the grinder rather than in the casing, but the process was complete. I finally got something into a casing, and I start to make the links. I called the butcher again for that one. How do you make links? I didn't know. Start to make the links, twist forward, twist back, all this other really great stuff. And now I've got what looks like a proper set of sausages ready to cook. How do you cook bratwurst? Well, traditionally you poach them. And so I thought, let me go ahead and poach them. So I took a pot of water, put it on a boil, reduced the heat because I didn't want it boiled. That's got to be too hot. Reduced the heat to a simmer and threw those sausages in there. And I'm fired up. I'm ready. I've got buns and I got some sauerkraut ready. We're about to get wild. I got everybody excited in the house about bratwurst and cook them. I don't know how long to cook them. I think at that time I wasn't checking temperatures or anything. We just let it kind of do its thing. And after about 10 or 15 minutes simmering in water, I came back, and that pot probably had maybe a ½ inch of rendered sausage fat layered out. Now, I didn't know any better. I thought this was just part of the sausage making process because the sausages looked a little weird looking, kind of waterlogged, and they had shrunk and had a lot of bubbles and all this other really great stuff. But in my mind, I'm thinking, hey, I'm making sausage. This is what's going to happen. And cut open that sausage, stuck it on a bun, and took my first bite. And unlike that Johnsonville brat that made me want to just eat bratwurst every day for 14 days, my sausage made me never want to make sausages again. It was my most miserable and beautiful failure that I've ever had. In my journey of making sausage, it was grainy, it was very salty, way too much nutmeg, it was mushy at the exact same time. It was disgusting. And I thought I just spent $700 on a grinder that I'm more than likely never going to use again. And at that point, I put the grinder away, fed the sausages to the dogs, and I thought to myself, boy, I'm glad I'm over that hobby. But I wasn't. And that began the journey that has truly transformed my life. And I'd love to hear about yours. Tell me about your first sausage making experience. I hope that it was also a beautiful disaster because truthfully, those are the opportunities that we get to learn, not only about the craft, but also about ourselves. All right, guys, let's talk about today's episode, today's sausage, which also happened to be a beautiful disaster. I can't wait to show you and tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. If you're already familiar with the Smokin' It line, then you already know that the professional series for Smokin' It's brand has already been released. They have the model 3.5, the 4, and the 5 in the professional series with the upgraded control box and the convection system. Matter of fact, we've been using, and you might have seen some of our videos, the number 4 professional series convection smoker, and I gotta tell you what, I absolutely love it. But the thing to remember is that just because it works in a smaller unit doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work in a larger unit. And that's the reason why we are continuing with this prototype testing. We want to make sure that the number 6 is flawless before it goes into, production. Today's video is not going to be about the features and the benefits of the number 6 smoker. We're going to save that for later. We are going to, though, make about 140 pounds, 138 pounds of sausage, stick it in that smoker, and give it a cook. We have a working convection system. It heats up beautifully. I did a little test run off camera. And so basically, this will be the first cook in the number 6 smoker to see how it operates. We don't have bars, so we can't hang our sausage, but we will be able to lay them flat on the racks, and we're going to kind of see how many racks that we can put in there full of sausage. Hopefully we can fit them all. The 3 sausages we're going to be making for this cook is the Texas bowl of chili sausage. That was the sausage we featured in Celebrate Sausage, and it was submitted to us by Larry Kapigian. Absolutely amazing sausage. We've also got the Polish kielbasa classic, and then we've got the Texas hot licks. All 3 are going to be smoked in that smoker. They're going to cook at the exact same temperature, and we're going to be placing probes throughout the entire smoker. We're going to put, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 probes just to kind of monitor what's going on the back, what's going on in the front, what's happening in the middle, and of course what's happening at the bottom. So I want to see whether or not it cooks evenly or if we have hot zones, or that's the idea. When it comes to making sausage, if you are not in the mood, I'm going to tell you right now, it ain't going to come out right. As a Mexican who spent a lot of time in the kitchen, one of the first lessons I ever learned from my abuelita was that whatever emotion that you're feeling, whether it's sadness, whether it's jealousy, whether it's anger or happiness, that emotion is going to get transferred into the food, and whoever eats it is going to be affected by it. And at a young age, I thought she was completely crazy. But as I grew up and spent more time in the kitchen, started to feed more people, especially professionally, there's a lot of truth to that statement. So before we began, I had to get into the mood. We got a lot of meat. We got beef and we got pork, and we got to process it. We got to process it properly because every sausage is going to be processed a little bit differently. And I wanted to make sure that every step along the way was absolutely perfect. We chilled the meat. We cut it. We re-chilled the meat. And while it was chilling, we sharpened our grinder plate and a knife. Speaking of which, when was the last time you've done that? Because if you haven't done it in a while, maybe it's a good time to check out this video right here. After we sharpened our grinder plate and knife, we began to grind the meat. And I'm talking absolutely beautiful grind. 6mm grind on all 3 sausages. Came out like a dream. No fat smear, nice and pebbly. At this point, we are moving in the right direction. It's now time to mix our meat, but guess what? I need to re-chill it. And this is a step that is most often overlooked because people go from the grinder straight to the mixer, and it really depends on the temperature of the meat. In my case, it was a little warmer than I wanted it to be, so I popped it back in the freezer, which is kind of complicated for 130 pounds, 140 pounds of sausage meat, but we had to re-chill it. Once it was re-chilled, we seasoned it, we mixed it. We put it into a casing.
Speaking of casings, let me show you something right quick. This is a 29-32mm hog casing. It's been soaking in a solution of baking soda and water all night long. And notice it's still tied. We're going to leave it tied. I'm going to show you the power of using baking soda in your water. Now, it doesn't really do much for tenderizing, but it does make it super slippery. So check this out. I'm going to grab one casing from this top area, right? So notice it's still going to be tied. We're not going to untie it. And I'm not going to edit this. This is going to be real time so that you can see what I'm talking about. All right, here we go. We're just going to go ahead and pull that casing right on out of that bundle. And under normal circumstances, this would be a pretty difficult task because it would bunch up. It would knot up pretty easy. But when you use baking soda in your water, it helps with knots. It keeps everything very lubricated. As you can see right here, we're going to continue to pull this out. And Every time I needed another casing, I did this exact thing until I used them all up. And never once did I get any kind of a knot, any kind of bunch. Look at that. Came right on out. That was absolutely perfect. So if you're not currently using baking soda in your water, you're missing out. Mix about a teaspoon per quart, and you'll be good to go. All right, let's go ahead and get this O-ring lubricated and get this sausage stuffer jammed up. We are using the electric sausage stuffer from the sausage maker. I can unload this sausage stuffer in about 90 seconds on high. Now, it does take a little bit of practice, but notice right here, we get that thing completely unloaded. Done. And there's our 3 sausages. Texas hot links in the middle. We've got our Texas bowl of chili. Absolutely beautiful sausage. And there's our Polish kielbasa. Now, these are going to hang out in our refrigerator overnight, and I am very pleased with the way that these sausages came out.
And if I had to be completely honest, I would say that I paid more attention to the details on how I made these 3 sausages than I have on most sausage batches that I make. I tend to get on autopilot, which isn't really a good thing to do, because after looking back, these sausages were perfect in every way. I mean, I didn't want the very first time I cooked in the number 6 smoker to have a sausage failure because of something I did. Well, turns out that the joke's on me.
All right, let's take a look at the smoker. As you can see, it's been properly seasoned. If you haven't done that yet, you should definitely check out how to season your smoker video we got online. A lot of cooking space inside this smoker. I got to admit, I mean, this is huge. We got 138 pounds of sausage in this smoker. I was able to fit 100% of everything that we made, and so we are at capacity, I believe. I am leaving the top 2 racks open so that the convection system can blow over the top of the sausage. I don't want it blowing directly onto the sausage. I think that'll cause it to cook too quickly. And we're going to go ahead and put in some probes. So first probe is going to go into the back, top row at the back. And let me just kind of show you an overview of how we ended up doing the probes. I've got top, back, and front probe. So we definitely have that monitored. We also have one right in the middle. And then below that, we're going to do another one in the center. Right there at the very bottom, we're going to do several more probes, obviously in the back and in the front, just to kind of get an idea of what it looks like. At this stage, we're going to let the sausages dry. So I don't want to start cooking yet. I definitely want to get rid of some of that moisture. So we're going to leave the door ajar while we power up the smoker. Let me show you the schedule that we've got. Now, this is ready for Wi-Fi. I haven't set the Wi-Fi yet, so I'm just going to go through it manually. And our first step, and this is kind of one of those beautiful things about the Smokin' It smokers, you could program the steps. Our first step is set to 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and we're going to let that run for an hour and a half. All right, this is going to be the drying stage. Step number 2, so after an hour and a half, it's automatically going to bump up to 125, at which point we're going to add smoke. We're going to let that run for 2 hours. So we're going to start smoking at 125. Step number 3, that happens automatically, is set to 150 degrees Fahrenheit. Monitored by time, we're going to let that run for an hour and a half. All this happens, behind the scenes. Step number 4 bumps up to 175, and notice we have a very gradual stepping process when it comes to our temperature. That's going to go for an hour and a half. I do think it's going to be done between step 3 and step 4, but in the event that it needs to go hotter, step number 5, we set it to 200 degrees Fahrenheit, and we're going to let that run for another hour and a half. And I'm going to be monitoring this the entire time. I am going to let this get to temperature before we turn the convection system on. I find that it gets to temperature a lot faster without the fan. So once this gets to 100 degrees Fahrenheit, which is our preset, we are going to turn that fan on. And as you can see right here, our smoker temperature and our set temperature are both at target. So let's go ahead and just flip that switch on and turn this to high. Notice there's a second switch. This gives you the option to plug in maybe a cold smoke generator or something that requires electricity. You can just plug it right into the box. Not a problem there. All right, turn that on high. That's going to help the drying process. And let's just kind of see what happens. So after about an hour and a half, this is what our sausages look like. They're no longer glistening, and I'm very happy with the way that they dried. Not a problem. Look at the bottom section, and we are evenly dried from top to bottom. You can see we have a slight color change on some of these sausages, and that's exactly what you're looking for. And after this initial drying stage, let's look at some of our probes. So the external probes are reading kind of interesting. Notice that we've got a bit of a hotter area towards the bottom front. This 88 and 86 that you see right there, that's kind of the middles. That top left figure is towards the front on the top. I still think it's super early. Right now, the smoker just bumped to 125 degrees, so it's on step number 2, and I'm hoping that it equalizes. Let's take a look at the probes that are connected to the smoker. Those are going to be these right 2 figures. Notice the top back, that says 88 degrees, and the bottom back, that says 104. So right off the bat, we're 20 degrees, not quite 20 degrees, hotter at the very bottom towards the back. So that's right on top of that, hot box. And so we're definitely going to have to monitor that and see what's happening. Going back to the probes, it looks like everything is still pretty even. But like I said, it is very early. We are only on step number 2, and so we are going to definitely monitor that. I did add an additional probe, so we have a total of 7 probes in there. And all of my additional probes seem to be reading within a couple of degrees of each other. All right, so let's go ahead and just kind of let it smoke. It smells amazing at this point. And here's something I noticed at the 125 set mark. So this is step 2. Notice the smoker temperature says 140 Fahrenheit, but the set temperature says 125. That's not supposed to be like that. That's a spike in temperature. So we're going to have to keep our eye on that and see what's causing that spike. And we are now on step 3. Smoker's at 150. Notice probe 3, that's the bottom back, is still elevated by about 10 degrees over the front back. So I'm getting, although it's a little bit closer, I am still getting that hot zone right there towards the bottom back. And so maybe we have it slightly overpacked or not enough airflow. Notice that we've got the internal probes. They're close, but they're not perfect, right? So, we have about a 3-degree variant between hot and cold, 4-degree variant between hot and cold. And so definitely was something we're going to have to monitor. I did turn the convection system down to about 50% at step number 3 to see if that would help equalize, some of those temperature swings. And if I just want to give it a quick monitor halfway through the cook, maybe do a temperature check, see how those back ones are doing. The sausages look amazing at this point. This is step number 3. Our smoker is at 150 degrees Fahrenheit. Right here, we're pulling out some Texas hot links. And look at that. I mean, beautiful, plump-looking sausage. And I am getting a hotter reading towards that bottom row all the way on the back. And so this is definitely something that we have to keep our eye on. Otherwise, I think that will burn that section before everything else is done. All right, so let's go ahead and close it down. One more look before we give this a summation. Absolutely beautiful.
All right, guys, cook's going great. A couple things that I am concerned about, just to let you know. There was a bit of a spike in the temperature, and I've got my thoughts on that. We'll share with you here in a minute, but I am keeping my eye on that. Also, there's a bit of a cool spot about a third of the way down right in the center. Now, I'm talking maybe about 7 or 8 degrees. So everything else, for the most part, is kind of cooking about the same temperature, but right in the middle towards the top, it tends to be lagging a little bit. And on the very bottom, now we have the second to last row occupied. Right towards the end, those 2 rows of sausages happen to be cooking a little bit faster. Matter of fact, I had to pull them before the rest of them. They were done the quickest, and so there was a bit of a hot spot at the very bottom. And it made me think, maybe those bottom 2 rows closest to the burner shouldn't be occupied, because at the end of the day, when you're dealing with convection, airflow is the most important thing. That's what kind of gets everything going. And that spot is directly above the burner, especially on that back wall. And so I could see where that might be problematic. Alternatively, I guess I could have spaced out the sausages a little bit better, maybe not put 140 pounds or 130 pounds inside of it, maybe reduce that amount to 100 pounds and see what happens. Maybe we'll do that in the next test. Now, about 20 or 30 minutes before we hit temperature, my alarm started going off. And so I thought, okay, we hit temperature a little bit early. And when I open up my smoker, this is what it looks like. Wow. I got to say, this was a first. This was a complete first, and it was quite of a shock. Thankfully, we were in the room when this happened. The sausages were not ruined.
Matter of fact, most of them came out perfect. They were pretty incredible. There was a small amount of sausage towards the center at the bottom that did get a little crispy, I have to admit. Now, all in all, I think it was about 20 pounds, maybe a little less than 20 pounds, mostly towards the bottom around the back. This is kind of what they look like, some worse than others, like this one right here. But I do want to show you a center cut, because when you make a sausage properly, when you have really good technique, you can have something like this happen, and it's not going to destroy your sausage. Now, the cheese did melt out. Cheese melts out at about 150, unless you use high temp cheese. So let's give that a center cut. And there's a couple things we're going to look at. Number one, it's still incredibly juicy, even after cooking to such a high temp. We've got a great texture on this sausage. So we're not going to pay attention to the fact that the cheese melted out, because that's going to happen no matter what you do. But what we're looking at is a result of great sausage making technique. We still have our fat. Everything's beautifully bound together. It's not crumbly. Look at that. Perfect sausage. So this is not a waste. Matter of fact, behind me, my wife's cleaning up the rest of the sausage. And this is what that looks like now that she's done with that batch. And all we did was trim off the burnt parts. right? It smells actually like a pretty awesome barbecue if you wanted to know the truth. But I'm looking at these sausages and I'm thinking, you know what? We can repurpose this, cut them up into cubes, maybe cut them up into smaller pieces, dip them in corn dog batter and make awesome corn dog bites, throw it into a casserole with, maybe some potatoes and some extra cheese and turn it into this really awesome Texas style, potato casserole with awesome sausage. And there we go. We're definitely going to use that.
And now for the million-dollar question. What caused the fire? Was it a smoker malfunction? Was it a user error? Well, I can tell you that I spent a lot of time thinking about this. And I believe that what happened was a perfect collective storm of situations that independently wouldn't have caused the problem, but all together created an issue that gave us the result that we had. So for starters, the algorithm for the smoker wasn't set appropriately to the size of the smoker. That's what they call the PID settings. And I didn't even think to test them. And so I just kind of went with the smoker the way that it was programmed. And it was sort of undervalued, I guess, based off of the size. I think that the algorithm was set for a much smaller smoker. And that's the reason we got certain spikes in temperatures. All right, so that's issue number one. I could have fixed that, by the way, if I would have tested it first. Issue number two was the ground that the smoker is on is not level. I just noticed this today for whatever reason. It kind of leans back a little bit. And when it leans back just a tiny little bit, the fat that's rendered from the sausage, and there really wasn't all that very much, but the fat that's rendered should come forward into the drain hole that goes into a drain pan. But in my case, it kind of pulled toward the back. Now, like I said, there wasn't a lot of oil, but there was enough for it to create a pull towards the back left corner of that smoker. That was issue number two. Issue number three, I am using the wood box to add smoke. And about midway through the cook, I wanted to add a little bit more smoke. So I open up the smoker, pull the smoke box out, add a little more smoke, or a little more wood, excuse me. And when I push it in, I don't push it all the way back in. Matter of fact, I leave it about 2 inches away from the wall. And the reason that's a problem is because it left that heating element just a little exposed. So there you have it. You've got this perfect storm of issues. Spike in temperature because of an algorithm issue. You've got rendered fat pulling towards the back of the smoker, a slightly exposed heating element, and then you've got sausages that are dripping onto that element, and boom, you now have a grease fire. All right, now that that's out of the way, let's talk about a couple of things that I noticed about the smoker after doing cook number one. Going all the way to the very bottom, I love the extra large hole, although because I wasn't on level ground, I really wasn't able to benefit from it too much, but I do think that that's going to be great in that large smoker, and in the next cook, maybe we'll do, I don't know, 100 pounds of pulled pork or something like that, and see how it handles that type of product. I did find that the wood box could benefit from being a little bit wider and maybe a little bit longer. If you notice at the bottom of a digital smoker, you're usually going to have a guard. That guard's not technically supposed to be touching that heating element. And in this number 6, it's pretty close. And so I think if we had maybe a 1/2 inch clearance on either side, it's not only going to be better for the wood box, but I think it's also going to be better for the life of the heating element. A couple other things that I did notice is the hot spot at the very bottom, and the next cook that we do in it, I am going to remove both racks at the bottom just to see whether or not it was a rack issue or if that hot spot develops the next rack up. And so that is just something we're going to keep our eye on. After we had our fire, we put the fire out, temped the sausages, and everything was basically ready except for that top third center. That took probably about another 20 minutes to get the temperature. And so there's two things that could be going on with that. Perhaps the spacing or the quantity of the sausages was too much for that smoker. Also, the airflow might not have been getting to that particular area quick enough. And so I think that having, maybe something in that smoker that allows you to put directionals for the airflow, maybe directional to the right, to the left, maybe a lower a little bit, might get that air movement to move around a little more evenly. But then again, at the same time, maybe you can't put 140 pounds of sausages in that smoker, and we need to reduce that to 100 pounds and see whether or not that center cooks or whether it still has that cold spot. Let's see here what else. The algorithm does need to be changed, so we're going to be doing an auto tune in the next video. So if you have a digital smoker and maybe it's not keeping the temperature right, and it should, especially if it's a smoking it smoker. But if you look at your smoker and you all of a sudden notice that you're, your actual temp is 30 degrees hotter than your set temp, well, then you have a problem, and you might want to, change the algorithm, change the P, I, and D values. And I'm going to show you that in the next video, how we do that with this smoker so that we could dial it in a little bit better. All right, folks, there you go. That's all I got for you today. I'm going to go and enjoy some smoky, crispy Texas hot links. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below. And while you're down there, don't forget to leave me your first sausage making story. I'd love to hear about it. Thanks a lot for being here. If you got something out of this video or you just found it entertaining, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.